Hello, welcome to Viewpoint Christian Academy. Our mission is to empower parents for Christian education. I'm Dr. Adam Rondo, the director of Viewpoint, excited to be able to bring you another Monday Moment. This is part one of a two-part series that will feature an interview that I was able to conduct with Mary Ellen Siegler of Massachusetts Family Institute. Now, before we go any further, let me just say to mom and dad, to the parents that are listening, the topics that will be covered in these two sessions are of a sensitive nature. And you may want to be careful if there are little ears hanging around. Some of these things will be sensitive. And so I wanted to give you that warning up front. And if you're a student or a child that is happening to listen to this right now, I would suggest you go listen with mom and dad or ask them to listen first. But without any further ado, I want to jump right into our segments together with Mary Ellen Siegler, and we will be discussing the problem of the sexualization of children in education and in the culture at large, and what we can do to help guide our children and protect them at this time. Let's jump right in.
So it's my pleasure today on this Monday Moments here at Viewpoint Christian Academy to be able to have the opportunity to speak with Mary Ellen Siegler. Mary Ellen Siegler is the Director of Communications and Research at Massachusetts Family Institute. She administrates the Facebook page that you all need to go and follow and like, Massachusetts Informed Parents. And we're excited to have her and have her join us to discuss the sexualization of students that is going on in the education system and even in the culture around us at large. There is a conscious plan. I could say conspiracy, but we'll stay away from that word. But there's a conscious plan being implemented to drive cultural change in our nation, and it's targeted at our young people. It's targeted at students and children. And this is a spiritual warfare. And we are blessed to have soldiers in this battle like Mary Ellen, and she's a great soldier in this battle. She's joining us today to provide information and resources to help our kids not only avoid the conflict that is going on, but also to resist and combat the ideas that are being thrown at them, some ideas and some resources for that, some of these ungodly influences that are coming against them. So we welcome you today, Mary Ellen. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Dr. Rondo, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. And I just so appreciate all that you have done, also contributing to the world of education and Christian education and encouraging and equipping parents. So we each are contributing a piece. And I so appreciate the good work that you've been doing as well.
Well, thank you. It's a team effort on the part of the body of Christ. That is for sure.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And so today, though, we want to talk about some of the disturbing things that have been going on in public schools. And it's maybe for a while, it was kind of happening under the radar, but it seems like now it's kind of blatant and it's out there kind of in everybody's face, some of the things that are going on. And specifically, I wanted to talk, because this is one of the areas of focus that you have on your Facebook page, in regards to a couple of different things. One, sometimes it's abbreviated as CSE, or Comprehensive Sexuality Education. And then the other, I think, is SEL, Social Emotional Learning. Some of those that are kind of pervasive, especially in Massachusetts schools, but it's not limited to Massachusetts. Of course, it's around the nation. So could you maybe explain what is it and what are some of the common elements that are behind these curriculums that are being imposed in schools?
Sure. So Comprehensive Sexuality Education, or CSE for short, is a specific type of graphic sex education curriculum. It's a specific approach. It's based upon the premise, all curriculum and all education comes from a worldview. And so the underlying philosophy and worldview behind CSE curriculum is that, one, children are sexual from birth, and two, they have the right to sexual pleasure. So this is the underlying premise included and that inspires CSE curricula. So once you understand that philosophy is in the background, the content in the curriculum begins to make sense. So things like it normalizes sexual activity for teens. It normalizes multiple sex partners, STIs, abortion, pornography. So these are all things that are normalized through CSE. It's also, CSE is also being taught not only through specific curricula that's typically taught beginning in 6th grade through 7th and 8th grade, and sometimes up into 9th and 10th grade in Massachusetts schools. But it's also starting to come in the elementary grades. So it may not come in through a specific curriculum, but there's this steady drip campaign that I like to describe it as, beginning really as early as preschool and kindergarten all the way through elementary school. So how that is showing up is things like LGBT themed books, storybooks being read in the elementary classroom, or lessons on gender using colorful graphics that appeal to a young student, like the gender snow person, or the genderbread person, or the gender unicorn. And these are graphics that describe a certain view of human sexuality, orientation, and gender. So, also presentations that are being done in the schools, safe schools programs. Activist groups are coming in under the guise of anti-bullying programs and presenting CSE type information, particularly around the ideas, around the issues of human sexuality and gender. And so there are ideas being presented to our students that way too. And then in 5th grade, you start to see puberty education. So a puberty education will often introduce the idea of masturbation. So, and it will normalize it and, encourage students to explore. And then, of course, this is where we're seeing transgender ideology coming in too, through the puberty education. So it's a steady drip. Now, as far as social emotional learning is concerned, social emotional learning is really the foundation underneath all of it. It's really kind of difficult for parents to even understand or wrap their heads around, because it's underneath and through everything. So what I mean is there are standalone SEL curricula that some schools are teaching, but more often than not, it's a set of ideas that are being implemented throughout curriculum. So you'll see it pop up in math word problems, or you'll see it incorporated into, it's definitely being incorporated into CSE type classes as well. So what it is, it's a way to psychologically prepare students to accept new cultural norms. It undermines religious and traditional moral belief. And it also motivates students to be led by their emotions. It's less rational thought, more emotionally driven. So it leaves students really vulnerable to be easily manipulated and controlled. And it's some of the language that you might hear around social emotional learning is that the school is a family. So you may, a parent may hear a superintendent say that, and may think, oh, well, isn't this nice? Our school officials want our school to be a family, and we think of it as being a good thing. It is not a good thing. So initiatives like SEL, social emotional learning, is really working to replace the family with the school. So, and SEL lessons often will very subtly undermine parents' values. It brings separation between children and parents. So, for instance, it might, if it's talking about gender or orientation, it might say something like, you may have been, some families believe or think, or you may have been taught
How about that?
that, that sex is a binary, male and female. But there are other genders and possibilities. And so you want to have a growth mindset. If you hear that term, if any parent listening to this hears that term, growth mindset, you need to be very concerned about what the context is and how it's being applied. So it's challenging, like I said earlier, it's challenging cultural norms, it's challenging religious and traditional moral belief, but it wraps it up in things, in character traits and values that we all share,
Right.
like empathy, kindness, right? Perseverance, grit. If you hear grit, you need to be concerned about that phrase as well.
Okay.
So, and so, a parent may get something home from the school saying, we will be covering social emotional learning. We're going to be learning how to be kind and how to be empathetic and how to persevere and how to navigate challenges, right? These are all on the surface very good things and values that we share. But what's hiding behind that is it's very manipulative. And it undermines the parent-child relationship.
I notice as you're speaking a few things that set off bells to me, because I understand that humans, obviously, we were created as, if you would, with the desire for sex, the sexual drive. However, to say that a child has a right to have sexual pleasure, even in their young ages, that is contrary, of course, to what we believe in the scriptures, that God designed the sacredness, marriage is honorable, right? And the bed undefiled, Hebrews tells us. So that's definitely a counter to the worldview that we would hold as believers. But I also really like the fact that you're pointing out this idea of key terms to watch for, growth mindset. And a lot of this terminology could almost be, if you would, Christianese, if you would. But like you're saying, it's not. It's just the opposite. It's just borrowing the terms and leading in the exact opposite direction.
Yeah. So the terms, a lot of the education that I do with parents is they will send me things that they get back from their school officials, and they'll ask me to take a look. And I will see all the language being used, and parents will say, here's what I received, doesn't look too bad, I'm so relieved. And then they'll send it to me and I'll look at it and I'll say, not so fast. Here's what's hiding behind what was just sent to you. So, if you're getting things like, if you ask your child's health teacher, what kind of sex ed is being taught, and they come back and say, oh, we don't teach anything that's not age appropriate. So, who's defining what's age appropriate? Because I've evaluated quite a bit of curriculum now in Massachusetts schools, and I can tell you that what's being presented to kids most often is not age appropriate. So if you hear that term, question it, right away. If you're hearing things like, oh, we just teach about healthy relationships. So, healthy relationships is where there's going to be a lot of LGBT content, or where the kids are going to be taught consent skills. So see, it's not refusal skills, it's consent skills. So, and that's like an important difference.
Yeah.
Because now if you're talking about consent skills, you're teaching children how to say yes to sexual activity. But if you're teaching refusal skills, you're teaching them how to say no. So, it's like the devil is in the details. If you're hearing informed decision making. So these are things like, this is where abortion is being introduced to students. And students are being taught how to secure an abortion without their parents' knowledge or consent. So yes, the language, even if you hear a term like risk reduction skills or abstinence plus or abstinence based, right? These are all code words for comprehensive sexuality education. So abstinence based, all that means is that it might include one paragraph somewhere about abstinence as an option.
Okay. So it says abstinence based, but it really just means we mention it, essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So abstinence plus, you'll hear CSE referred to as abstinence plus.
Oh, abstinence plus.
Yes,
Okay.
All right. Abstinence plus, or sometimes abstinence based.
So there are, you do have, obviously the students at, let's say, Viewpoint Christian Academy, this is not something mom and dad have to worry about.
Right.
Our curriculum in health says things like, life begins at conception. It talks about the fact that marriage is between a man and a woman, and designed for marriage. Sex is to be designed to be experienced and enjoyed in marriage, as opposed to all of these other things that are going on. However, two factors I think are at play here. One is that we oftentimes have students in our school, in our program, but one of the children is in our program and another one is not. Maybe they're in a public school. So a parent could definitely benefit from this, even if they're not in that. But also we have many students that have left the public education system and have come into a program like ours or into any other Christian school. And there are residual factors. Mom and dad, you need to be aware that this is stuff that they may have been introduced to or may have already been, if you would, I'll use the term, indoctrinated into in this regards. And so, there is an aspect of transforming your mind, as the scriptures tell us. You have to be renewed and transformed by the word of God from these things that have been introduced into our lives. So I think this is excellent. This is really important. But I think also, I want to ask you this question. Does it go beyond the classroom? Because are there things in the culture, like TV, media, et cetera, that children and teens might frequent, that would also be in this realm? Maybe some examples that you could give from that.
Right. Yes, it's definitely in the culture. I mean, we see it so often. It's in music, it's in media, it's on social media, it's in movies, it's in children's programming and cartoons. I mean, Sesame Street just added a transgender character, right? I think that was last year to their lineup. There's Disney movies, right? These are things that I used to be able to, when I was a kid watching a Disney movie, my parents could trust that it was going to be wholesome, but you can't really trust that anymore. You have to really filter absolutely everything. And so, definitely it's coming through the media. And I always tell parents, in Massachusetts, we have a sex ed opt-out option. So the Massachusetts law does give an option to parents to, one, they can review the curriculum in their school district if they ask the school officials to see it, and the school has to give them reasonable access, and they can opt their child out of sex ed. So, but what I often tell parents is that don't be fooled into thinking that if you do that, you opt your child out, which I encourage all parents to do. They should do that. But if you opt your child out, it doesn't automatically mean that they are protected, because you cannot opt out of a culture. So, there are other students that your child is probably friends with that is attending these CSE classes. And like I said, it's coming in through school assemblies, student clubs, media, even so many children now have a mobile device and have a phone. So, I encourage parents, put protections on your child's phone. Limit what they're able to watch on TV. I mean, when my kids were young, TV was by permission only. When you're going to watch something, okay, what do you want to watch? Let's take a look at it. No, we're not going to watch that. How about this? So, and it was exhausting, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah,
but that is the kind of diligence that it takes. And even with the phones, my kids, and we were the odd ones, but my kids did not have a cell phone, and still, until they started working a job,
Amen.
And
Preaching
we
now.
needed them to have a cell phone so we could get in touch with them, right? We were very odd.
Good.
And they were
That's
not
good.
allowed on social media. I didn't allow them on social media until they were 18. So, and that may seem radical, and I'm not telling everybody that that's how they have to, manage things with their children. I'm just saying that there are things that you can do to minimize some of these messages. You're not going, and my kids are not protected. We're not fully protected from it. I mean, these issues were coming up in the church. They were coming up in the area where we lived, in relationships with family members. So the issues were coming up and we were discussing them, but it's a matter of, degree.
Yeah. And control, in some regards, some people may resist me using this word, but when it comes to my children, I want to be able to control that conversation. Right. Because as a parent, I'm the leader of the home. And my job is to lead that child in the way that God wants them to be led, and to guard them and oversee them. So even when it comes to something like TV, like you're saying, or introducing these concepts and these kind of things, I don't want to just be involved in that. And I think this is maybe, I don't want to go too far down a rabbit trail, but a lot of times we hear parents need to be involved in their children's education. I think that's a misnomer. We don't need to be just involved. We need to be the leaders of our children when it comes to their education. And so mom and dad, and that education stems beyond the book learning. It goes into, as you're saying, TV, social media, and telephones, etc. So mom and dad need to take that lead. And like you said, I love how you pointed out, it was exhausting.
It was exhausting.
Yeah.
And we miss stuff,
Sure.
I mean, we do, because you're not on top of it all the time.
Right.
So,
but it was exhausting because you were being diligent and taking that role seriously. I think that's a great example for a lot of parents to see that, it's not easy to be a parent. It's not easy to do
it
this,
isn't.
But it's what God has called us to do.
It's true. And it's through that process really of parenting and trying to do well by our children that, the Lord transforms our hearts and minds at the same time. And so I've learned more about God through being a parent than I think in all the previous years before I ever had children. So, and education is so much more than just reading, writing, and math. Yeah. I mean, the education of a child it's really forming the heart of that child. So even, you can put controls on your kids' phones. You can limit what they see through media and, on TV or movies. But really, I mean, those are external controls. I'm not saying don't do that, but we really have to reach the hearts of our children. I think we'll probably hit on that eventually, but that is what education, the public education system now, there's no doubt about it. Yeah. It is influencing our children's hearts and minds. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We always like to say around here that education equals discipleship.
It's true.
And
absolutely true.
It's so much more than just 2 + 2 and ABC. It's an actual worldview that's being built into the child. So
I like to say education is never neutral.
Yeah, amen.
It's never neutral. It's coming from some philosophical background or belief.
Absolutely.
Wow, we've really covered some heavy topics, haven't we, in this very first session. As we conclude, I'm reminded of one of my heroes of the faith, Corrie ten Boom, and a story that she related in her autobiography, The Hiding Place. As a young child, Corrie had been in school and had heard some of the older children talk about something that she didn't understand, and it was of a sexual nature. And one day as she was riding on a train with her father, she had been thinking about it, and she asked her father about something that she had heard and asked him to explain it. Now, she was a little girl at the time, and her father didn't say a word. All he did was sit in silence until the train came to a stop, And Corey was a little confused as to why he wouldn't answer the question, but the train came to a stop, and he was a watchmaker, and he had a tool bag with all of his tools as he was traveling. And he told his daughter, Corey, you carry the bag this time. And she bent down to pick up the bag. She grabbed it with her hands, and she pulled as hard as she could, but she just wasn't strong enough, or she wasn't big enough to pick it up and carry it. And she looked at her father and said, I can't do it. I can't carry this right now. And he reached down and very easily grabbed the bag, picked it up, and started to walk out. And he said to her, my daughter, some things are too heavy for you to carry right now. Let me carry them until you are ready. You know, there's a lot of heavy things that the world is throwing at our children right now. As parents, we need to have the strength and the wisdom, like Corey's father had, to carry these things for our children and help them along. So I pray that you will have the wisdom and the strength to carry and guide and lead your children. I hope what we have covered in this session has been a blessing. Don't miss the next one because there's going to be a lot more great information and a lot of great practical tips to help you help your children. God bless you. You have a great day.